Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You know, the one thing that literally every single diet and nutrition expert that we've had on the show seems to agree on is that we need to eat more veg and get our greens and consume all natural products. But let's be honest. How many of us actually have the time? Well, recently I had the opportunity to meet some of the folks over at Organifi, and I've been absolutely blown away by them and their product. You see, Organifi is an organic superfood green juice powder that literally covers all your nutritional bases without having to eat 5 bowls of kale. It saves you loads of time, loads of money, and a lot of chewing. And really all you have to do is add water and drink it. So to check it out and save an incredible 20% off your first order, visit Organifi.com. That's Organifi.com and use coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Hey there, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. You guys, today we are joined by Justin Stenstrom, a nationally acclaimed life coach, author, entrepreneur, and speaker. Now, Justin is the founder of Elite Man magazine and the host of the Elite Man podcast. He's also the author of the book, Giving Shy Guys Game. But Justin's mission overall is to empower modern men to be their absolute best selves. Definitely a mission which I share, though I have to say this episode has a ton of appeal for both men and women. Now, throughout the episode, guys, we will talk about confidence. We talked about self-esteem, fear, relationships, and so much more. And I think you guys will clearly see that after so many years of interviewing people and writing and reading and learning just about everything he possibly can about the topic, Justin has really become a jack of all trades when it comes to personal development. And so I think what's really nice about this episode is that it really hits the high notes of a ton of different areas of life. Ultimately, I think you guys are really going to enjoy it and learn a lot and maybe get a dose of inspiration. So let us know on Twitter or by email if you do enjoy the episode. So without any further ado, guys, I want to present to you my new super friend, Mr. Justin Stenstrom. Mr. Justin Stenstrom, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
Jonathan, thanks so much for having me, man. I am pumped to be here. It
is an absolute pleasure, I'm literally looking forward to getting some elite man tips. I'm really a big fan of all things modern gentlemen, so I'm hoping we're going to share some really cool stuff with the audience today.
Awesome, brother. Me too. I'm excited.
Yeah. So Justin, tell us a little bit about your background and story. I mean, how did you get into this whole self-improvement space?
Yeah, so it started for me, my whole self-help journey started back probably 8 years ago. I was going through a really tough time with anxiety, depression. I had really low confidence, self-esteem issues, troubles getting dates, and I really didn't have any friends. And it was just a really tough period of time. And it took me a while, sort of long story short, it took me a while to figure things out, but through a combination of researching and just trial and tribulation and testing everything out, like all these things, concepts I was studying, and as far as like trying to figure my life out, I slowly started to get over these problems and figure stuff out. And then flash forward a couple of years after that, I started helping other people get over their problems. And it kind of started with like the dating thing, like the dating confidence. So I initially launched my first sort of blog. It was about dating and confidence. I was about 21 years old. And then slowly from there, just kind of, offshooted, and I started covering other topics, health, fitness, some business advice. And then, it's kind of where we are today with like covering everything under the sun as far as, becoming like an elite man goes.
Amazing. So talk to me a little bit about the depression. I mean, what was happening there? Why was that an issue for you?
I think it just kind of culminated of years building up of having like no social life and no friends. And, I was kind of like the cool kid in grade school, middle school, up until about 8th grade or so. I was one of the cool kids. And then, you're sort of a big fish in a small pond. And then you go into high school and it's like a whole different ball game. And I kind of just got lost in the transition and, lost a lot of my friends and sort of went down the wrong path, started hanging out with some kids that, weren't really my friends, but I kind of wanted to fit in with them and realized later on that they really weren't my friends and they were kind of, bad for me and just really didn't care about me and kind of, 17, 18 years old, like senior year of high school, junior year of high school, I started like really feeling like I was just an outcast and I didn't belong. I wasn't connected to people. And like I said, I didn't have any dating life. I didn't kiss a girl till I was about 18 years old.
Wow.
I didn't go to any of those prom dates and all that. So I didn't have any of that. I didn't go to the parties, which is like something that's really popular at that period of time in your life. And so I think it just kind of built up over time where I was just like really depressed. And then on top of that, I was getting these panic attacks 3 to 4 times a week about like random things that would just trigger it. Like I was just always worried, always thinking like, I don't have anything. And it got so bad at one point I was suicidal because I didn't have anything. I didn't feel like, that things are going to get better. So at that point, it was really the point where I'd kind of decided that I had to make a change or else something bad was going to happen.
Wow. Okay. And so for you, it was just, and I think honestly, you and I share this, for you, it was a matter of learning that kind of pivotal moment that, hey, if I don't like these things about myself, I can change them. So walk us through a little bit how you developed yourself into someone that you could be proud of being. I mean, how did you overcome that challenge?
The first thing I think I did was get a hold of those panic attacks. So like really stopping them sort of from taking over my life, because anyone who's ever had a panic attack knows just how crippling it can be. So the first thing I think was just kind of getting my mind clear of all these crazy thoughts that were happening all the time, these sort of crippling fears about what was going to happen to me or where I was going, or even like these suicidal thoughts that were creeping into my mind all the time. So I had to really get a hold of that before I could sort of tackle anything else like the dating problems or my confidence problems or even my like overall happiness. So the first thing was really figuring that out. And I kind of honed in on this little process that I can certainly share if you'd like, but it's a number of different things, but it's kind of the biggest couple things out of it is just living in the present moment. And then also if you're about to get a panic attack, doing this little process, this quick little 3-step process that just kind of stops the panic attack in its tracks. And when you can kind of stop it in its tracks, you don't have to keep worrying about it. Because anyone who knows this, it's like kind of a vicious cycle of worrying. And then it kind of triggers more panic and more fear and more anxiety. But if you can kind of figure out how to stop it and keep it from taking over your life, it's very empowering at that point.
Incredible. Okay. So I want to get into that process in a little bit. First, I wanted to ask you though, I mean, what today, obviously you're a pretty confident guy. What would you say is today your superpower?
I think today my superpower is probably my persistence. Like anyone, I mean, you know this, Jonathan, probably better than anybody, how tough it is to be an entrepreneur and someone, or even a solopreneur, like you're working by yourself, especially when you start off at first. And it's just like, you have to knock on so many doors before you start getting, those entrances into different places or getting those connections or getting those relationships that you need to be successful. And I think anyone who doesn't have that superpower of being persistent and keep trying over and over again is going to fail in being an entrepreneur. So right now I've been successful so far up until this point because of the persistence I have. And I just keep knocking on doors and making relationships and making connections. And even though I fall sometimes or I don't quite reach my goals that I have, I never give up. And I just kind of always look forward to sort of the challenge and overcoming that challenge.
That's a solid superpower.
Thanks, man.
Justin, I want to ask you, I mean, I know a lot of what you share with your audience involves different ways of building confidence. And I have to say, that's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because I've had my own struggles in the past with insecurity and then kind of on the other end, becoming an egomaniac out of that insecurity and just my journey to finding this harmonious balance. So talk to me about this whole idea of like, how do you build confidence in an authentic and empathic way?
So I have a little process too that I teach. I work with students and clients who want confidence. And I have a process I teach over and over again that's really applicable sort of across the board in any field. And if you want, we can go over that as well. So the main thing, I guess, to really start with confidence, and I think this kind of starts with anything, is to realize that you have confidence in your life. Like I've never met a single person who doesn't have confidence already in some aspect of their life. A lot of people don't realize it, but they have confidence in different areas. Like, for instance, I like to use this example a lot. For someone who wants like social confidence, or picture like a sort of nerdy sort of video game playing kid, or a guy who just kind of stays at home and plays video games. Now, he doesn't have confidence to go out and say, talk to women, or, be a good social person and kind of be the center of attention when he's out in public. And this guy may think he's not a confident person, but the reality is you take that guy and you put him in the situation where he's around his environment, or he's around, say, a couple other sort of geeky, nerdy, and I'm not picking on nerdy people at all, because I love these kind of nerdy guys and, sort of self-described, video game fanatics and stuff, because I work with these guys all the time and they're great. But, take this guy and you put him with another sort of nerdy video game guy, and you put them in the same room together, they're going to be confident. They're going to be talking about the video game. They're going to be talking about all the aspects to the game, and what's good about it, what's not good about it. Maybe even talking some crap to each other, and making jokes and making fun of each other. Those guys have confidence in that situation, in that environment, because that's what they're familiar with. That's what they know. Now, again, you put those guys in a social sort of aspect and put some other people in a different environment, they're not going to have confidence. But if they think back to the confidence they have where they do have it in that video game room, they can sort of then transpose that into the social world. They can start to think about, how do I act when I'm in the other world, in the other environment? Now, how do I bring that forth in this new environment? And I think it's important to realize that. I think that's really the first step, because everybody has confidence. Everyone has it within them to be confident in any situation. It's just a matter of bringing that forth.
Interesting. Okay, I really do like that. I have to say, I definitely think there's a right way and a wrong way to develop confidence. And like I said before, I've definitely tried both. I think the wrong way is to develop it based on ego and be like, well, I've done this and I have this. And probably the right way is improving yourself and connecting and kind of ultimately accepting and loving yourself. And I saw a little bit of that in what you said. I mean, has that been your experience with the people you've worked with, that it's more about, like, it almost sounded like you were saying, find the things that you are good at and learn to appreciate that in yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely works in that way. And like I said, a lot of these guys, I work with a lot of these people that have like a similar sort of background as what I mentioned. And it's really about finding what you're already good at, what you're already comfortable at, what you already have confidence at, and then bringing that about, like appreciating that side of you and understanding it and sort of accepting it fully. And then you can sort of transition it into other places. I think it's really as simple as just kind of understanding it and then being okay with it and then learning to summon it back up.
All right. So I really like that. I really think there's something there. And I think, like, if anyone out there is listening and has struggled with self-esteem, I think there's a lot of value there. And just this idea of, like, there was also, you said a lot of really interesting stuff that connected with me about being present and being present in the moment. And that connects really closely with this idea of acceptance. And so I think there's a few components here that really also were critical in my journey, right? This idea of being present in the moment, this idea of being accepting and accepting your surroundings. And then I think there's also just this component of, like, self-love that I think is so kind of under emphasized because it's become so cliche, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I just kind of thought of the guy, Adam Lyons used to be a former dating coach, and he was a Dungeons and Dragon guy, like a self-proclaimed video game nerd too. And it's not about sort of suppressing those things or maybe being uncomfortable with, like, being that kind of person. Like, here's this guy who was a Dungeons and Dragon nerd, and then, learn some of the stuff that we're talking about here, learn how to be confident, learn how to talk to women, learn how to be social. And he ended up being like one of the most successful dating coaches in the UK and then later in America. But he never, like, sort of gave up his sort of identity of who he was and the fact that he loved video games and Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. He just kind of embraced it and was, like, fully like, yeah, I'm a video game nerd. Yeah, I'm a Dungeons and Dragon guy. That's kind of my personality. That's kind of what makes me up, who I am. And he took that and kind of made it cool. Like, it was almost like cool to be like a Dungeons and Dragon game nerd after that, because, he just embraced it fully.
Well, what's cool is, like, accepting yourself and being just completely unembarrassed. I mean, if you think about the most confident people, the most attractive people, the most charismatic people, they're the people who are like really just don't care, right? And not in like a cold, well, I don't care what you think kind of way, in like a, hey, this is me, like accept me or don't accept me. I think there's so much confidence in that it literally makes people more attractive. I mean, it just changes the whole way people perceive you if you stop worrying about the way they perceive you.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Absolutely.
Amazing. So how about fear? Because I know you do a lot of really interesting work on fear. Where does that fit into the picture?
Fear fits into the picture. I mean, it kind of goes right along with confidence and, even the depression that we mentioned earlier, but it's really about embracing it a lot of the time and then being okay with it before you can get over it. So I like to use this analogy too. If you don't mind, I'll share a little story about how to overcome. I think that probably the most important way to overcome like your biggest fears. So rewind, I guess, a few years ago to when I'm going through this transition. I was probably 19, 20 at the time, and I'm hanging out with this buddy of mine. He's an incredible daredevil, sort of adrenaline junkie. This guy's like a skydiver, goes on all the roller coasters and just the craziest stuff you would imagine. And yeah, I ended up being like friends with them sort of, by coincidence or whatever, by happenstance, just ended up being great friends with this guy and then later became best friends with him. But we ended up going to Six Flags, a theme park, roller coasters and all that stuff. We ended up going there one day, hanging out. And I told him over and over again, like for my entire life, I've hated roller coasters. I told him over and over again before we go in there, like I'm not going to ride on any roller coasters. I just kind of want to go there, hang out, maybe talk to some girls and stuff, walk around. And, he says, yeah, whatever. And besides being a daredevil and a complete adrenaline junkie, he's also an incredible salesman, like a persuasive guy. Like he is incredible at getting people to do things that they don't want to do. So long story short, fast forward about 20, 30 minutes later, I find myself sitting next to this guy in the worst roller coaster there, like the Bizarro one. And I'm like, what the heck am I doing here? This is horrible. And we're about to take off for the ride. And I look over at him and he's, putting his hands up, yelling, saying, these ridiculous things, just like being a complete fool. And I look over at him. I'm like, Bobby, what are you doing, man? Like, we're about to die in like a couple minutes. Like, at least, have some dignity, at least calm down and just like relax before you, at least do me that. You convinced me to get on here. We're going to die. At least stop acting like a fool, man. Like, you're embarrassing me. And then he kind of looks over and I think he didn't mean it to be like profound or anything, but he just like looks over at me and he's like, Justin, like, this is how you ride roller coasters, dude. You have to do this. And I'm like, I don't know if it was because I was sort of going through a self-help transformational kind of period in my life and I just overcome like this depression and stuff. And I was feeling a little bold, but I ended up doing what he told me to. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. So, a couple seconds later, I start yelling and screaming, putting my hands up. Then we take off, going up the thing, the steep sort of drop right before we go through the drop. It's like that slow creep up and it's just like that, usually a terrifying feeling. But instead of that, I'm like yelling and like, we're going to die, just saying all these ridiculous things, but like yelling and screaming and like actually like loving it for some reason. And then, we go down that steep drop, that first like 100, 200 foot drop, whatever it is, going to like 70 or 80 miles an hour. And I put my hands up. I started yelling with Bobby and we're both screaming and yelling just like dumb things. And for the first time in my life, Jonathan, I actually enjoyed a roller coaster. Like I actually fully like embraced that moment and loved it. I loved the ride. And any other time before that, I would have been throwing up sick and hating it and wouldn't have gone on any other roller coaster. But for the rest of that day, I went on like every roller coaster 4 or 5 times and just had a blast doing it. So the moral of the story, it's really just as simple as this. It's just embracing your fears fully, like 100%, taking them on and going with them. And then when you do that, you have nothing to fear but fear itself, as FDR said, and it's 100% true. Anybody can try this. For anyone who doesn't like roller coasters, you can try this next time. Face your fears, fully embrace it, scream, put your hands up, yell, and you're going to notice that the fear actually not only goes away, but you actually enjoy it.
That's really interesting. I mean, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the exercise that Tim Ferriss talks about in the 4-Hour Workweek of like, just imagine like what you're afraid of. The worst thing. Okay, I lose my job. Then what happens? Okay, I lose my apartment. You just go, what's the worst, the worst, the worst, the worst, the worst? And eventually you get to like, I'm destitute, living under a bridge, begging for coins. And then you're like, all right, and then what? well, I guess I'd rebuild, I'd save up coins, I'd recycle, I'd figure out a way. And then you're like, oh, all right. Like, that's what I was so worried about, like having a 1 year setback in my life. And ultimately, like once you get in deep and like dig around in that reality, it's never as bad as you could possibly imagine. I guess that's sort of what you experience with the roller coaster.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love Tim Ferriss too, so I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, it's just like you actually think about what's happening, and everyone feel like, what's the funniest thing is the scariest part is of the fear is not actually the fear itself, like the kind of the quote says too, but it's actually sort of the fearing of the fear, like worrying about what's going to happen. Like what's going to happen, like you said, like Tim said, is never as bad as what you actually think it is. Or for instance, for people getting panic attacks, it's never actually the thoughts of what's happening about why you're getting the panic attacks. It's actually the fear of getting the panic attack itself that's like scary. And I think if you really kind of get to wrap your brain around that and kind of understand that it's really not as bad as you think it is, you can then get over it at that point.
I love it. It's kind of like the bark is always worse than the bite.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Justin, what in your experience are really kind of the most critical things holding people back from really becoming their best selves? I mean, of course, we've done something like 90 episodes here, so I've got some opinions, but I'm really curious because you do your own show. You've interviewed some of the top experts as well. What do you think is holding people back out there?
I think people are being held back, again, by the fear of sort of stepping out of the norm of stuff. So it goes back to what we just said of as far as like what's going to happen, like, what happens if this happens, or, 10 steps down the road. They're always projecting themselves into the future and sort of coming up with these false ideas of different fears that can come to reality. And I think at the end of the day, it holds people back from living the life they want to live. Like, for instance, people get stuck in like a 9-to-5 job that they don't love, but, it pays the rent or it pays the mortgage or it pays, this or that. And it's like, well, I can't, quit this job. I can't go after my passion. It might take 2-3 years to make money out of that. Or, maybe I'll never make money from that. Or maybe, people will say I'm crazy, or maybe, people at work will think, I'm losing my mind and I can't do that. It's like, oh, it's not for me, or it's not really a reality. I read the 4-hour work week, but I don't really think it's, for everybody.
Right.
So they project themselves into the future, and they want to stick with the norm of society and what everyone else says or what their friends think is a good idea, and not what they think is a good idea, not what they really want. I think it really holds people back from finding true happiness.
I love that. And, I think in that is something that I always often say as well, which is so many people view life as kind of a prefix menu. And they don't realize that life's a la carte. Like, you can take pieces, you can leave pieces, you can leave your job. You don't actually have to have a day job to have, a very happy and successful life. And you don't have to have all these components. It's really just a matter of reshifting the way you look at life and the way you look at so-called limitations or boundaries.
Yeah. And man, I like to just kind of add on that too. It's like you have an open book of stories that you write into your own book. And those stories haven't been written. That book hasn't been written yet. But a lot of people, I feel like, have the mindset like it has already been written. Like they have their life already planned out for the next 40, 50 years. And they already know what they have to do, or it's already told to them what they have to do. But it's like that book is completely empty. You can put into that anything you want to put into it.
Absolutely. So, Justin, tell me this. Your publicist suggested actually that I asked you about some of the signs of a healthy relationship. I thought that was really interesting because recently on the podcast, I had Alex Sharfin turn the mic back on me and just like completely dig into my love life or lack thereof. So I thought it was kind of a really interesting topic, and our audience really responded super well to that idea. So talk to me about the 10 signs of a healthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm glad you brought that up. Typically, I don't really share as much of this, so I'm kind of happy I get to kind of talk about this. I happen to be in a happy relationship myself, too. So a lot of these things, I wrote this article actually a while back, a similar article about it a while back that got featured in Life Hack. So it's pretty cool, like kind of reflecting on your own relationship and then getting to like write about it. So a lot of these things are applicable to my relationship, but also anyone thinking like if they're in a relationship or in a healthy relationship that kind of, that they think might be right for them, or if they're questioning whether it's right for them, they really should consider if these sort of steps apply. So if you want, I can just kind of go right through the list.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So number 1 is you have little to no arguments. So this, obviously every relationship has arguments. There's bickering, there's a little back and forth. There's, arguing about what you want to eat for dinner or what's on TV, what channel to put on. There's little things like that happen in every single relationship every single day. But the arguments I'm talking about here are like the major arguments, fighting for hours at a time or about something serious or not talking thereafter for a few days, like those type of arguments. If you're having little to none of those, it's a really good sign. So that's number one. Number two is your arguments are productive. So the times that you do have arguments, the times that you do fight and have like those serious arguments where it is going on for hours, or you do kind of have that little break period or whatever where you might not be talking or, happy for a couple of days, at the end of those major arguments, you actually are productive. Like you figure out something major in your relationship. You figure out some kind of struggle that you guys are going through that you kind of overcome after the argument. So the times that you do have them, they're productive. They're not just useless kind of wasted arguments or wasted time that you guys go through. That's number two. Number three is you trust each other completely. So when you have trust in a relationship, that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to really just know that your partner isn't going to do anything to sort of disrespect you or offend you, any of those types of things. You can trust them wherever they go, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they love you and they're going to be there for you and not do anything to disrespect you. Number four is you feel good about your future together. So a lot of the time, people in relationships don't really have a good understanding about where they're going in the future, or maybe they feel like there is no future, or that the future is kind of blurry. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't feel good about sort of you two being together there. That's not good. If you feel any of those things, you really have to kind of reconsider if there is sort of a future between you guys, and if you're in that relationship you want to be in. If you do think, you guys have a great future together and that things are going to be good going forward, then that's a great sign, and definitely a sign that you guys are in a healthy relationship. So number five is you have no regrets about being with your partner, and your desires for, in this case, other women or other men are not sort of present anymore. Like you're always going to find other women attractive or other men attractive when you go out, and that's just kind of naive to think that'll go away once you're in a relationship. You're going to get sort of blind eyes to anyone else, but that's not what I'm talking about. You're always going to be attracted as a human being to the opposite sex or to the sex that you're attracted to, but you have no desire to be with that person, or you have no desire to want to sort of cheat on your partner. Like that has to go away, I think, when you're in a healthy relationship. Jonathan, number six, and just feel free to kind of cut me off at any time.
This is fascinating.
All right, cool. Number six is you have great communication. This is always, and I talk to a lot of relationship experts, marriage experts, matchmakers have come on my show before. So this is always like the number one thing as far as relationships go, and always the biggest sort of trouble that relationships face is communication. You have to have great communication to have a successful relationship. And this means talking about everything that you want to talk, like you feel you have to bring up in a relationship. A lot of relationships come to an end because a lot of the time, one person or the other or both are holding something in, like holding in, a slight that they had from the past, or holding in something that they didn't want to bring out to cause a fight. These things build up over time. They nag, they sort of snowball effect and sort of stay with people. So bringing them out and talking about things, getting them out in the open, and then getting over them, more importantly, is so important here. It's imperative that you do this thing and not hold stuff in. So great communication about everything across the board is number six. Number seven, you think in terms of we and not I. When you have a partner, when you're in a relationship, it then becomes we. It's not just, what you want, or it's not what your partner wants all the time. It's what we want together, doing things together, making sure that we're both happy in our relationship together. Now, sometimes it's, you decide where you want to go on the date, or they decide what they want to eat. That's great. That's fine. But overall, it has to be in terms of we. It has to be thinking that both of you are together in a relationship and not just what you want. So number 8 is you completely respect your partner in every way. Again, this is kind of going back to what we talked about before a couple steps ago, but this is really, you just know that you can't disrespect your partner. You don't, even if you think like you're doing something that may be considered disrespectful or, maybe crossing a line, you stay away from doing that. Like you don't want to put up any signs or, any sort of reason why your partner might get upset or disrespected. And it's really just comes down to appreciating that partner and appreciating that person as a human being and having the utmost respect for them, like putting them above everyone else in terms of sort of like who you respect most. Like you can respect great people, like say, Tim Ferriss or something, or, your parents, like that's kind of a different respect, but having a respect for your partner, I think is sort of the utmost respect for any person. And I think you should kind of carry that, in everything you do, like always having that in the back of your mind that you have to respect your partner. Number 9 is you can't wait to see them. If you're the person who is always excited to see your partner, always excited or eager to, get home and give your girlfriend a hug, give your boyfriend a hug and say you miss them. And, you do actually miss them when you're away from them for whatever period of time. Like, you don't have to miss them all the time, but if you do miss them, that's actually a great sign that you're in a healthy relationship. It's a great sign that you're happy with the person you're with. If you never miss them, if you don't feel like you want to see them, or if you're miserable seeing them, it's kind of a big red flag that you may have to sort of figure out if you want to be in that relationship or maybe move on because you're probably not happy. Number 10, the final step is you truly love them. You love everything about them, not necessarily like, you love all the things that you hate about them. Not necessarily like you have to love everything, but you love even the things that you hate about them or you don't like about them, like the little sort of idiosyncrasies or things that annoy you. Maybe like they don't put the seat down, or maybe they don't wipe the counter, things like that. Like as much as those things might annoy you or bug you, at the end of the day, you love them as a person. You love them entirely as a person, even with their flaws. And, you couldn't see yourself with anybody else. That's the final step.
All right. That's a solid list. And this is a list that you've just kind of come up with over the years of kind of experimentation?
Yeah, just sort of a list I've come up with after talking with a lot of these relationship experts, dating experts, and psychologists even who've come on the show, and really putting thought into my own relationship and kind of thinking about what I wanted. I was single for many years, kind of dating. And, a couple of years ago, I just started dating this great woman and, reflecting on what I liked and, kind of my happiness in being in a relationship.
All right. So that's really awesome. I feel like there's not too much more to even really dig into that because that list seems really super comprehensive. So, and we'll obviously link to that blog post. I'm sure there's a lot more there if people want to kind of read more about that.
Cool, man. I appreciate it.
Incredible. So Justin, let me switch gears completely and ask back on kind of the self-improvement routine, and just a question that we really like to ask in general. Do you have any skills or habits or routines that you do regularly that you feel make you perform at a higher level?
Yeah, I think I'd have to say the sort of best routine. I mean, there's a couple of different things I could probably mention here, but I think the number one routine that I continuously do is set the bar super high. Like I have super expectations for what I want to achieve. I don't like write these goals out necessarily all the time. I mean, I use a notebook and I write things out all the time, like ideas and stuff, but I don't necessarily write these goals out. But I have these incredible goals that I set for myself that seem unattainable, things that I want to do. Like I'll put up a deadline of something for, the Elite Man magazine or something, and it'll seem unattainable to a lot of people or even friends or colleagues that I work with. Like, oh, why are you doing that? It kind of seems like, maybe a little early, or maybe you should wait a couple months afterwards, or, you really think you're going to do that by then? Like kind of like these goals that are tough to meet, but I set these goals all the time to push myself sort of in as close to as getting to that goal as possible. For instance, the Elite Man conference I had this past August was my first ever like major conference, and I had 30 expert speakers come, and there was about 70, 80 people each day in attendance. And I'd set this goal of doing this. I mean, I always wanted to have a conference, but I set the goal of doing it. And I only gave myself a few months to sort of set it up, maybe like 3 or 4 months to set it up. And I'd never done a major conference like this. Now people are flying in from like all over the country and even all over the world. We had people from like the UK and Asia even coming to this to this conference. And it seemed at first like it was going to be such an unbelievable hurdle, and it actually turned out to be a lot of work that I kind of didn't even expect. But the fact that I ended up sort of achieving this goal and putting it all together was just so incredible for me personally. And even like the people, like the speakers and stuff who came were like, wow, this was great. Didn't think you were going to do it. It's kind of shocked that you actually pulled it off. But I was just so happy. And doing things like that just kind of keeps pushing me to greater and greater heights. And I think it's a sort of a double-edged sword where it's like, I'm always sort of dissatisfied with where I'm at right now, which motivates me to do more. But also, like, I know that I'm kind of like going back and forth with like being happy with kind of what I have and being grateful as well. So it's sort of like something I deal with all the time where I have to go back and forth with that. But it also keeps me motivated and keeps me sort of looking to do the next thing.
Awesome. I love that. So what are you working on now? What is the next thing?
Well, the next thing that I'm working on in this sort of exact moment is the new show that I'm coming out with December 5th. It's called the Justin Stenstrom Show. So we have the Elite Man podcast, which does a lot of guest interviews and stuff. And usually we focus on one topic for the Elite Man podcast. With this, I want to sort of delve into more of the background, the backstory, and sort of the full picture of what a lot of my guest experts do. And like you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, I appreciate you bringing that up. We have a lot of like the top people in the world coming on the show to give their advice. Guys like you even come on and just give sort of their best tips to my audience. But this new show, the Justin Stenstrom Show, coming out December 5th, is going to sort of give the full picture and like the rest of the story, like exactly what these people do in their everyday lives and sort of what motivates them and their strategies for daily success, and focus on the whole picture. So that's what I'm working on now, man. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, incredible. That sounds really, really awesome. I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So Justin, can you share with us really one major challenge besides, getting this whole podcast set up, just one major challenge that you're facing right now, either personal or professional, and why it's particularly vexing? And, as someone who's done so much work on confidence, self-esteem, conquering fears, walk us through how you're planning on overcoming it.
I think the thing I'm working on overall is probably the next conference. I just want to share the message I have with the podcast and everything. And it's kind of vexing me in a way that it's like, I want it to happen right now. But, as you know, man, and especially any entrepreneur listening, you can't have things right away. Like as much as we have, this online community, this great community that's been building for 3 years, it's like, I want to have that face-to-face community where I have thousands of people sort of in attendance and thousands of people interacting in person. It just takes that to a whole new level. And I think it's really sort of, I guess, frustrating at times where I can't have it all, today, where I want to sort of get all these people together, these thousands of people that we have online, in the Elite Man community. I want to get them all and to have 1,500 people or 2,000 people in one room interacting in person. Like, that's just incredible. That's my goal in the next couple of years, to have the conference be that big. And I think the challenge with that is just that I want it sooner rather than later. And I want, what I mean? I just want to have it now as opposed to waiting down the road and kind of jumping through hurdles and stuff. So it's kind of a back and forth with that. I understand the process. I understand the time that it takes to do that, but I'm also sort of, a patient person, but I can sort of lose my patience from time to time with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you, that's exactly what I'm going through right now with something that we've been working on in the business for about a year. And it's just, why is it not done now? Why is it not? So that is my exact struggle right now. And asking the questions, is it because of me that it's not done now? Am I not leading, managing, stuff like that? So.
Absolutely, dude. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's tough, because we're entrepreneurial types who we want to create the vision and have it just run. The world sometimes doesn't work that way. So Justin, I want to ask you two last questions. The first one, of course, where can people learn more and get in touch with you? I know you said you have a new podcast coming out December 5th, which should be right before this episode comes out. Where else should we send people?
Yeah, definitely check out the episode, Justin Stenstrom Show, and subscribe, guys, if you can. I really appreciate that. And if you want, also check out the Elite Man Conference page. So it's just elitemanconference.com or the Elite Man Magazine, which is sort of the mothership of all, elitemanmagazine.com. And check out either one of those. I appreciate it, Jonathan.
Awesome. So Justin and I will give you our closing question before we wrap up. If people take away just really one message, I know we talked about a lot, we covered a ton of ground here, and they take that message, they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, which one would you hope for it to be? What would you hope that they really remember here?
I hope people listening really remember that there is a solution to any problem you're having. I've gone through anxiety. I've gone through panic attacks of 3 to 4 times a week, of depression to the point where I was suicidal, having no friends, having no dating life, having no direction or purpose in life, and not knowing that I could make a living sort of doing what I love. All these things I've gone through, and the sort of resounding thought after overcoming these things is that there was a solution in every single one of those cases. So no matter how bad it got, no matter how tough it was from time to time, the fact that there's always a solution, there's thousands of actually solutions. There's ways to figure out your problem even more than you know or realize. Don't give up and just keep plugging through and figuring out what that solution is for you, because you will find it if you keep trying.
That is an incredible, incredible point, and just so perfectly ties in to everything we talk about on this show. So Justin, I really, really want to thank you for your time and your energy and your dedication to what you're doing. I think it's really important, not just for men, but for everyone out there. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate it, man. Take care.
You too.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.